Welcome. I'm Chuck Boyce, CV Creative. This is one of track C. It's a new thing I did. Track A is normally application based. Track B is more business based. C is a special one I put together. 5 sessions, more of a who, what, when, where, why of how to use AI and how it affects a small business. And so today the session is on who owns AI work in your business and what to do when the person reviewing the output doesn't fully know the territory. So we'll close with turn off the recordings and do some question and answers if you have any. And so with that, let's get going. AI has many failures, and one thing is in common is that no one was named. No one named being that everybody does it, but nobody was actually accountable for what went out. And so the tool was running, outputs were going somewhere, nobody told they were responsible. And so the first time somebody looked closely, when a client called or someone, there was a problem, a bad pricing, a bad proposal, a bad email, something that was AI generated and just went out. Nobody was accountable for it. And so today, that's the pattern. Today, we'll talk about how to break that pattern. So, 3 sections. Why ownership matters more than tool quality, the case for accountability, what ownership actually requires, it's not a policy, and what changes when AI starts taking actions. That's whether they're assistants, agents, agentic workflows, and how things change when you take the human out of the picture. So, lower accuracy is a safer one. And so with a tool that produces 90% accurate outputs with no owner will cause more damage over time than a tool that produces 80% accuracy, but it has a named reviewer, because the reviewer catches errors. That's obvious. The second effect matters more. The reviewer learns the failure patterns, gets better at the job specifically because they're doing it. 90% with no owner, nobody's learning everything, nobody's learning anything, and the AI especially isn't learning anything. And so with that human, there gets to be more learning, more human, more accuracy from the perspective of what goes out, not necessarily what the tool produced. And so without an owner, errors don't get caught. And so the damage doesn't announce itself. They also don't get learned from. And so 2 months in, a team is using a tool that's been quietly drifting and nobody's been calibrated. They don't know where it's failing. And when I mentioned drift is when you have an agent or an AI or something that has been trained with your context of your business, your voice, something about that, but nobody's updated the voice to go along with how your business has changed. And so that's where things start to drift. You start getting old information and your answers aren't as good as they could have been. So downstream, you may have refund requests, a client who stopped responding, a proposal with the wrong scope. This is the ownership gap and the second of my 5 blind spots. And if you haven't been part of this before, I refer to the 5 blind spots as ownership, data, process, the financial aspect, and the regulatory compliance aspect. And so it's where many projects fail because there's no ownership, doesn't have anything to do with the model itself, what tool is being used. It's because there's not an owner with that product. So here's an example, a 15-person firm. Customer service tool, drafts are pretty good most of the time. 2 months, there's 3 groups in the team. 2 edit everything heavily. 3 who trust AI and they don't do anything. And nobody knows which is the right group or which group is right. And so the owner thought the tool was working because the volume was up. Errors were buried in unchanged drafts, distributed across multiple customers, and it was invisible until one customer called to complain. There's no known owner, there's no review steps, they don't know where the errors came in, and shared standard when the draft was needed. It's not a tool problem, it's because no one is reviewing the output. And again, with the two employees where every draft is heavily drafted because they don't trust it, that may take a little bit of time, but then when you do three employees who are not changing anything, they should, but they don't, and that's where errors come in. So ownership is three things, and like I mentioned in the intro, not a policy. The ownership is not a team. It is a named individual. It's not a committee or a policy. They review. It's the first call when something goes wrong. If something has to be reevaluated, they own it. They can update, they evaluate what it is. And so somebody has to be associated with these various things. Who's reviewing, who's going to be responding to the calls, and who's going to be evaluating the sources. What ownership is and isn't, reviews the output before it leaves the business. One person every time, actual authority to reject or revise. A review step without a name is a shared assumption that somebody else is checking and no one is. And so shared assumptions is how quality dies. You need that one person. The first call when something goes wrong. It's not a vendor, it's not IT, it's the person whose name is on the output. They investigate, remediate, report back. Vendors aren't responsible for your business outputs and your outcomes. The support team can tell you what the tool did, but that's not who's responsible for it. And then who decides on the use case? It needs to be reevaluated. Who does the tool updates, the process changes, new data source updates, new team members feeding into different things. There's a lot of things, but one owner has to be responsible for coordinating all of that. And so if the structure can't survive single failure being traced to a specific name, it's not a structure. Ownership runs on a documented process. And so if your team is doing the same thing 5 different ways, the reviewer can't tell whether the output is wrong or it's just unusual. And so this again goes back to the documented process. If you have a process that everybody kind of understands how it should be done, but everybody does it slightly differently, you can't train an AI. The only way to fully train an AI is to document a process that humans can run consistently. You can give it to a brand new hire, which AI could be considered a new hire. You give them the documented process, and they should be able to run the process without anybody helping them. And that's what you need for an AI agent or assistant or anything to run, is you have to have it be able to follow a documented standard operating procedure. SOPs aren't a nice to have. They're a substrate. Ownership runs on. They are boring. They're tedious to create, but it's important. And that's why people don't do it, because it is the boring part. They need to do other things to get their business going. But without that foundational support, it goes back to the 5 blind spots, a process illusion. You have workflows, and if the workflow is running your business, if somebody doesn't own that workflow to keep it up to speed and up to date with how your business is changing, it's not going to run effectively. It's going to drift. Human in the loop sounds like oversight, and it often isn't, because being in the loop means the person is reading the output. It doesn't mean that the person can tell the difference between good answer and a well-structured wrong one. The gap is where most review processes fail, because AI is written to sound very confident. And again, AI says it's intelligent, but it's not. It's a pattern repeater. It's probabilistically choosing the next words, and it's very confident in the output. And if somebody is reviewing it and they're not familiar with the overall concept of what the answer should be, say you're researching a new product and you're trying to find out about it, if the answer from AI is very solid, it sounds good, but if you don't know the subject matter, how do you really know if it's true or right? And the most common form of the review is the vibe check. You read it, it sounds right, you move on. Vibe check works when you know the territory, like I mentioned. Excuse me. You notice the numbers were off, you catch a logical gap, you catch maybe the wrong person being referenced, you push back on the framing because it doesn't match your experience. The problem is when the AI precisely because you don't know the territory. So again, it sounds very confident that it is the right answer. The vibe check is working off an incomplete information. So the model's very good at producing the outputs that feel correct. That's not a bug. Again, it's how they were built. They were trained on human writing, human approval signals. They know it sounds right, and that's what it's putting out. So now, if you follow the latest updates, Anthropic just released Claude 4.8, and they said that it's more honest. And so that doesn't mean it's more correct. And so these newer models, they're starting to flag uncertainty better, which means that they're not going to say that this is the right answer. They're going to say you may want to check on this. I'm not confident in this answer. And so they're starting to not be as confident. That's what Anthropic is calling honesty, but it's not correctness. It's just not throwing out the hallucinations as confidently as it was even in 4.7. And so 4.8 is bringing in more pushback. It's not going to be as sympathetic as it has been, but it's still going to give you a confident sounding answer most of the time. So the failure mode, worth naming, it's not dramatic. You're not going to miss a model hallucinating in a field you know deeply. The risk is when it's in that adjacent territory. There's stuff you kind of know and you're trying to gain expertise. Say a contractor's writing a proposal in an industry they're new to. The framing sounds right, the specifics may not be. Or an owner researching what the regulatory requirements may be for a new product. Again, it's a new area and you may not know 100%. Or a manager summarizing a contract language that you've never had to interpret. And so a human is in the loop and they believe they're reviewing it carefully, and they can't reliably tell the difference between what's a correct answer and what is a well-structured wrong one. And so it's not a failure of attention, it's the design. And so with your exploring new ideas, challenging existing, finding new patterns, all of these things, again, they sound good. Humans can't reliably catch the errors. It's a design flaw and it's something that's difficult to overcome, but it is going to be there. So the vibe check works. It won't save you, but it is discipline. And so I'll go over each of these. The vibe check is how to overcome these. There's 5 different moves. So you change the question, break up the input, read laterally, know your domain, triangulate the stakes. So number 1, change the question you're asking. The old question was, who's behind this information? The Google approach was you get an author, a publisher, funding motive. Whatever Google gave you was pretty reliable. With AI, again, the question doesn't return useful answers. It sounds good, but there's no trace. And so now, who can confirm this information? Instead of who's behind it, who can confirm it? You're not looking for outward verification. You're looking for upward verification, not inward at the source. And so if that makes sense, you're trying to validate the claims. And so can you confirm this rather than can you give me the information? Breaking up the output. If you get a large one, take it by steps. Get your full output and then make smaller claims and verify that against it. Don't try to verify the whole thing at once. Again, if it's a new direction, each number, each citation, each piece of guidance becomes its own check. And so check each of those individually, especially if it's an area you're not familiar with. Most AI errors hide behind otherwise correct paragraphs. A single wrong number in a well-written summary will get past a holistic read, but it won't get past a checklist of small claims. And so if again it's something that you're very unfamiliar with, break things up and verify each thing. And again, these depend on the value of the output to your business. If it's going to affect your client, your reputation, your finances, your regulatory requirements, any of those things, the less sure you are of the source, the more you should check it. And that's where you can't have AI automatically doing things for you in areas that you're not 100% comfortable with. Three is to read laterally, meaning that reading vertically is reading down the AI response and accepting it. Reading laterally means opening other tabs and corroborate with them. And so open a new tab for each small claim. Find credible non-AI sources. It's extra work. It is extra work. 10 minutes of lateral checking against the cost of a wrong claim, a client deliverable, a regulatory failure. Make sure that, again, depending on the value and the potential liability to your business, it's where you want to focus on the lateral reading. Open those new tabs, research it on the side. Don't just take everything in a read. It sounds good, accept it. And so run the math for your business and for each process. It really depends how much time it affects, how much time you spend on it is related to the monetary effect on your business. Number four, know what's actually verifiable. Some tasks are easy to check. Some take almost as much expertise to verify as you do. Example, if you're doing legal drafting, medical reasoning, regulatory interpretation, strategic analysis, if you don't have the expertise, you do need that extra step. It's a formality. Practical question to ask when any workflow goes live is, can an assigned reviewer actually catch errors in this domain? If the answer is no, you have two options. Bring in someone who can have that knowledge of the domain, or restrict the use case. There's no other options. It's either find somebody who knows it or don't allow it. And so, again, assign a reviewer who can actually catch the errors in that domain. And again, it goes into those things: legal, medical, regulatory, strategic analysis. Those type of things require that higher domain expertise. And the last one, triangulate when the stakes are high. And so anything, again, legal, financial, client-facing, anything that can affect your business, run it through a second tool against the different data source, compare them. If they converge, great. If they diverge, then you need to decide where they diverged and which is the right way to go. And so before it leaves the building, try to cover your base, cover what you're doing. So summary version, when you know the territory, the vibe check works most of the time. When you don't, you need the process. The discipline is what makes the loop. And so fractionate it, break it up into smaller pieces, read it laterally, open your tabs, just do extra research, verify checkable pieces, not each one, verify each piece, not the whole. Know your domain, verifiable, can't even speak right now, sorry. Get the reviewer that knows the subject matter to be your reviewer, and then use multiple sources, compare, and decide which is the proper way to go. And so it's a discipline, and it's something that you need to work into your workflows. So here's some bonus questions that you should consider when you're reviewing stuff. What claim is most likely wrong? Check it. What has the AI assumed that we didn't tell it? Is that assumption right for your context? What would a skeptic say about the conclusion? What would someone with real experience here have included that's missing? Where's the output confident when it should be uncertain? And if you did a rough draft, did my rough draft contain things that the polished version lost? And so, again, that expertise needs to be brought in, but these are good questions to be able to ask to find where the content is good enough to give to whoever needs it, your client, the regulator, your business partners, whoever. Make sure that you run through these types of questions. So looking by team size, some people here, they're 1 or 2 people, less than 5 people. It's easier to get this through. It may not affect your business as much, but when you start getting into larger groups, teams, businesses, the task may take a few hours to a few months. 5 to 10 people, 1 person, part-time, couple of hours a month. You have a tool list, a review standard, and the first person to call when something looks off. When you get larger, 10 to 25 people, you have a named person per department, plus 1 central owner. Maybe 4 to 6 hours a month for a central role. Above 25, you're probably going to have a written job description with explicit time calendar slots. The role in general isn't a committee. It's not a function. It's not everyone's responsible. It's one of the biggest gaps that is in the business right now. It's not the missing policies. It's that nobody's told that they own the result. Normally, if 20-minute conversation, it's not a project, document it, have that person listed, keep them involved. They just haven't been told that they're the point person, but you should have a point person assigned. Shadow AI is another thing I've talked about recently. Shadow AI is where your employees are using unapproved tools. They may be using a personal version of ChatGPT or Claude or something at home, their own personal Gmail version of Gemini, and they don't realize that privacy is not turned on and that they're sharing the data, and the company that they're using is using their data for training. Now, if they're using this at home and they're trying to write a proposal and they're putting in customer information, they're putting in proprietary customer or client or company information, that may be going up to Claude or Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, and they're using that proprietary data. Some other company now has access to your data. If you have it controlled, here's the tools that we can use, here's the settings that you need to use. Again, you can't govern what you haven't named, and so most SMB teams, they're using AI tools that their owners didn't approve. You have to train your people, document what they can use, what they can enter in, and make sure that they're trained on it and they sign off on it. It's something that you avoid that shadow AI, and shadow AI is the #1 cause of problems with, especially in the regulatory business, that causes problems that are financially negatively impacting a business. Agents and assistants and agents. Everything I said about ownership gets harder when AI is taking the actions. It's not just producing outputs, because if it's starting to automatically send something to a client and there's not a reviewer, you can't catch the error before it leaves the building. If the agent is letting it out, it's gone, and it may not have been set up well enough to have log files, and so you don't know where the information came from, who sent it out. The AI is taking that action, and if it's not being logged, you don't know about the drift, you don't know about the output that they sent until somebody complains, and then it's like, oh, the AI did that. The AI cannot be blamed in a regulatory or a legal action. It's always a human. Just like in the 70s when IBM tried to be sued, the judges said you can't blame the computer, it's the operator. AI is the same way. You can't blame AI. It is the person who sent it out. So if somebody set up an agent, they should be named. they're responsible for managing that agent, and they're going to be the responsible person, not the agent. Three things with this. The shift when you do this. Review the moves from pre-flight to post-flight. If you're finding errors in logs after the fact, the logging stops being optional. If it's not logged, it didn't happen. Again, you can't fix what you can't see. Logging is important. It's not something that most people think about when they create these agents, but it is necessary. The access becomes the attack surface. And so if you are using agents and they're talking to your email, your calendar, your CRM, billing, if they can read and write, an attacker could compromise that, and they can cause, since the agent can read and write, somebody could do a prompt injection into that agent, and suddenly it's touching your internal data, whether it's email, it's a calendar, a CRM. When it gets into a CRM, and especially in billing, you have a problem if somebody is doing a prompt injection on an agent and you're not logging it and you don't know. So most SMBs haven't priced that in. What happens when an agent can read, write, an attacker compromises that agent? That's a cost that most SMBs haven't even considered. And the last one is the API cost. When you start testing agents, an agent may make 10 or 20 API calls. And the way that API costs is normally token usage. And so tokens are bits of data, roughly relates to a word. And so if you're sending out a bunch of tokens, you start getting charged. And so if a simple agent is doing 10 or 30 calls, it may be costing you $1. But suddenly, if it starts scaling up and you're doing 100 to 300 calls, suddenly you're at $100 to $300. And so again, most people don't think about the scaling capabilities of what your usage cost is going to be. It's like a utility bill. You have token usage, model calls, downstream storage. There's a lot of compounded costs that really start to increase when you get into the agent world. Before you do anything that an agent takes action, verify what systems can it touch. Document every system. List is longer than expected. That's your first problem. What is logged? Every action. Timestamps, triggers, not summaries or actions, just every action. Who reads the logs? Is that assigned person? If nobody's reading the logs, nobody's knowing what is happening, it's an extra task. It's more work. Again, AI is supposed to reduce work. It's not. It's reducing tasks. It's moving tasks to another area. And so now you have somebody, instead of writing or researching, you're now having them review logs. Different person, it's a different task. So somehow your tasks are changing. It's not necessarily you're reducing the workload. It's switching to a different area. What's the kill switch? What happens if something fails? Who's going to turn it off? And what's the rollback? What happens if the work's in progress, if something is killed, and there's multiple triggers? And what are the downstream dependencies? If you don't know that, you have to document and control your agents more. A lot of this stuff is going back to basic programming principles and the way the vendors make these agents sound. They're very easy. You turn them on. They're going to do all this work for you. But what happens when it fails? If you kill it, what about the downstream effects? How do you roll it back? Those are questions that the vendors are not providing you answers for. And even if you ask them, they may be vague. Remember, their demos are done in controlled environments. They've been tested hundreds of times. They've run through the demos. It's a clean, normally simple edge case or simple case. They don't consider edge cases. They don't consider your data. It's in their controlled environment. And so demos are great, but when it's in your business, completely different story. They're not a starting point. Again, starting at the bottom. Document your standard operating procedures. That's what everything runs on. Next is your ownership. Find the point person. They're the first person. They reevaluate how your standard operating procedures have been defined in your agent. Review the standards, document the processes, verify their discipline. And once the agent is there, automate it. They're going to be workflows, but have that reviewability set in. Where are the logs? Who's going to review the logs? How do you define what is wrong? How do you stop it? How do you roll back? Things that agent vendors are not going to tell you, or agent developers may not tell you, but something to keep in mind. So here's a big question. When it goes wrong, who catches it? And that is the answer that every AI use case should, you have an answer for it. And so if you have that, you're in a strong position. If you can't, it's a gap. And so who catches it and what do they do when they catch it? So if you have a specific situation in mind, think of that. A tool you're considering, a workflow you're not sure who's accountable for, an agent proposal sitting in front of you. Name what's missing, figure out what the next step is. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help you walk through use cases and see where you are. And here you can contact me at cbcreative/contact, set up a 30-minute call, talk about your situations, and that would be where you go. So, other things that you can do. I have a few different free assessments out there. There's a quickcheck.cbcreative.com. That's 25 questions to see over each of the 5 blind spots where you may have gaps before you spend money. If you do the assessment.cbcreative.com, it's a little bit longer because it starts with 4 questions asking about the specific process you want to evaluate, and then it will go through 25 questions based on that process. You get a PDF report. That one you do have to enter your email to get the PDF report. So I do have a 5-claim report template that I'll put a share in the email that I follow up. It's a Google Drive. You can have this worksheet to work with. And then next week I finalize this. There's one more session, session 5, and that is the auditability, about reviewing the 4 sessions that I did prior to that. And so that is what I have today. I'm going to stop sharing.